May it please, Mr. Commissioner, you will recall that certain issues were raised during a session in January by the Commission. It has all been collated into a report by the Acting Secretary, Mrs. Lowe, who is going to present the report, and she's ready to take the oath.
If I remember correctly, it's Wilhelmina.
That's correct.
What's the second one?
Johanna
Johanna Lowe.
Frederica Lowe.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're going to testify again, so maybe we should let you take the oath again. No objection. You didn't have any objection to taking the oath the first time. The position is still the same.
That's
Then do you swear that the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you, Commissioner. Can I then deal with the first page of your report? It has to do with the certificate of incorporation for the PIC is dated earlier than 1 April 2005, when the PIC Act took effect. Is this correct, and if so, why?
The observation is correct. The discrepancy in the dates is a technicality that was not avoidable. The PIC Act 2004 was published in the Gazette on the 15th of December 2004. Section 12 of the Act has transitional provisions, some of which could be acted upon before the date on which the date would come into operation. In February 2005, the President of South Africa proclaimed the commencement date of the Act as 1st April 2005. On the 29th of March 2005, the Minister of Finance, by virtue of the powers vested in him in terms of Section 12(1)(a) of the Act, determined the date on which the Public Investment Commissioners were to cease to exist as such, and the term of office of each commissioner was to terminate. This date was determined as 31st of March 2005. In terms of Section 12(1)(b) of the PIC Act, all the assets, liabilities, rights and obligations of the commissioners had to be transferred to the corporation. This meant that the company had to have been incorporated and have to commence business on the 31st of March 2005 for the provisions of Section 12(1)(b) to be implemented. Further, in terms of Section 12(1)(c), the board must ensure that the necessary formalities to give effect to Section 12(1)(b) are complied with. This also meant that there must have been a board of directors of the PIC in existence by the 31st of March 2005. It was for the reasons stated in the previous paragraphs that the company had to be incorporated on the 30th of March, and then on the 1st of April, the Act and the corporation came into operation as contemplated in Section 2 and Section 18 of the Act.
Thank you. The second question, or the second matter raised, was there any instances where the Cabinet made changes or did not appoint the candidates put forward by the PIC to the board?
Yes, this happens on a regular basis. Basically, every time that the PIC submitted candidates to Cabinet through the Office of the Minister of Finance as the shareholder representative, the Minister of Finance as the shareholder representatives also propose names as the directors are appointed in consultation with Cabinet. Cabinet members then also have an opportunity to propose names. The PIC does not have sight of the final submission to Cabinet, so we don't know who the final nominated directors are, and the Cabinet is not obliged in any way to appoint the names proposed by the PIC.
Just a question. Do you submit, if you are looking to fill 3 seats, do you submit 3 names or do you submit more names?
We submit more names, but with a recommendation of 3 names.
Of 3, if there are 3 seats to be made? Okay, yes. So you do recommend and you say, if you don't like these 3, there's another 3 which yes. You can take for say another 3. Yeah? Okay.
Thank you.
Didn't that make you unhappy? Didn't that make you unhappy when every time you propose as the PIC, you reject it?
So at the end of the day, it's the shareholder who's responsible for the appointment of the board. So it's in his prerogative.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Point 3.
Just another question. So broadly, if you recommend people, do they get appointed, or half of them, or a third of them, generally?
Generally, I would say a third of our nominations, definitely. Sometimes there's only one that's not appointed from our nominations.
Okay, but broadly, the minister will have their own, say, 2/3, and then the PIC would have the 1/3?
Yes.
Is that correct? Is that kind of roughly? Okay.
Thank you. Point 3, taking into account the complexities, why do directors have only 2 years? That was a question posed by Ms. Marcus. I think you've responded to that.
Yes.
Thank you. In which policy of the PIC is there a referral to whistleblowing?
That is the PIC fraud, corruption and nepotism policy.
5, questions regarding the minutes of 29th approved minutes and draft minutes. I think the Deputy Minister has dealt with it, but you can briefly respond to that.
In summary, it is that the minutes are drafted by the board secretary and the company secretary are attending the board meetings, and then the minutes are drafted by the board secretary. In this specific instance, it was an in-camera discussion, and the board secretary was not part of the discussions. The company secretary then gave the notes to the assistant company secretary to type, after which they refined it. These minutes were then distributed to the board members for their input, and they've requested them to show the track changes. But at the end, the final minutes were adopted by the board as the true reflection.
Is it also now a common practice to have the in-camera meetings recorded?
Yes, from now on, all the in-camera meetings are recorded.
Then the point 6, explain what Charles River and HI portfolio systems are.
Okay, the HI portfolio system is the PIC's investment accounting system, which is generally referred to as the back office system. The system hosts both listed and unlisted instruments that PIC has invested in. This includes information from external asset managers, which comes through an automated interface. iPortfolio forms the PIC's primary book of records for the PIC's investments. The key functionality in iPortfolio includes investment accounting, fund administration, cash management, reconciliation, and post-trade compliance, as well as related post-trade activities.
Can I perhaps just, for me as a layperson, I understand it, is it a bit of a database?
Yes, it's a database of all the trading stock and the...
Thank you. Can you explain the Charles River?
The Charles River system is the investment management solution used at the PIC to automate front and middle office investment management functions across the listed asset classes. This includes listed equities, capital markets, and money markets. PIC uses Charles River to optimize investment portfolio, reduce investment risk, and improve reliability and consistency of the portfolio data. The system is used for portfolio analysis and construction, asset allocation and rebalancing, and broker and commission management.
Can I just take you back to the high portfolio system? Who has access to that system?
It is the deal teams, the transaction teams, as well as the accounting people, the finance department.
So not everybody has access there too?
No, it's only those departments.
Thank you.
7.
7 is management fees.
So the management fees are paid by the client to the PIC in executing its duties as an asset manager, as agreed in the client mandate, and are negotiated and agreed on when the client mandates are signed. Management fees are generally based on the PIC standard fees rate per asset class, for instance, equities, bonds. Management fees are calculated on the market value of the portfolio. This is the value of the investment, accrued on a daily basis and paid from the funds at month end. For properties, the fees are calculated based on the market value of the property. They are accrued at the end of the month and are paid in the following month. Then the management fee rates for listed investments. For the money market portfolio, it's between 1 and 2.5 basis points. For the bonds portfolio, it ranges between 2 and 3 basis points, and for equities, between 3 and 5 basis points. For unlisted investments, it ranges between 25 and 100 basis points, and for the properties, between 25 and 350 basis points.
Question. These fees, is the management generally happy with these fees in terms of, the amounts and all that, broadly? Or are they quibbling about them?
So to be honest, they are not very happy because it is much lower than market-related fees. Whilst we have to compete with the market, and the market is paid much higher fees, but this is on the basis that we know we are not going out to look for clients. We have a captive client base, so, and this is how it is agreed with the client.
But these fees, don't they constrain the PIC in terms of the structure, the operating costs and everything?
So if this question can be better answered by our finance department, but from what I know is there is constraints, especially if PIC have to employ a full org structure, then we will definitely have serious constraints in sustainability.
Point 8, dividends paid. Also a matter raised with the chair this morning. You have made a list of dividends paid 2910 to 1890.
That's correct, sir.
You confirmed the amounts in the last column.
Yes, I confirmed.
Point 9.
But Chair, just in relation to that, to reiterate the question of obtaining the terms and conditions under which dividends are paid.
Yes, we will submit a copy of the dividend policy to that regard.
Point 9.
Point 9 relates to benchmarking for the impact investing team. Impact investing is a relatively new sphere of investments with no standardized measurement of impact. Presently, PIC sets its own targets against which it is measured. This is refined based on experience. PIC clients have in place policies. For example, the GEPF has published its developmental investment policy statement, whilst the UIF has, the Unemployment Insurance Fund, has issued its social responsible investment policy, which is used as basis for investing by PIC. PIC intends collaborating with like-minded institutions to reach a stage of measurement against the global standard. The Global Impact Investing Network, an international organization, has started the process to harmonize impact measurements through the development of global impact investing reporting standards. So at this stage, we don't have a company where we benchmark ourselves against.
Just as a matter of interest, we all know it's public that there's an application by EDCON to be assisted by the PIC.
That's correct.
And that will fall under the UIF Social Responsibility Investment Policy.
Yeah, that's correct, sir.
Then we deal with point 10, that is evidence by Mr. Roy Rajar, which also explains some of the answers given by him, point 10.
Mr. Rajar was requested what is the average time for transactions in the unlisted space, and that typically takes between 3 to 6 months, though it may take longer, such as is the case in renewable energy projects where PIC is not the only financier. This usually would entail detailed negotiations with other funders, and sometimes there will be conditions precedent, including obtaining approval from regulatory authorities such as the Competition Commission.
Okay. Paragraph 11.
Deals with the distressed investments. There is a framework for monitoring of investments within PIC. PIC has a separate internal team which does the monitoring of the transactions in terms of compliance and performance. PIC does not rely on the directors appointed on the boards of investee companies to protect the investments, as PIC is aware that these directors owe their fiduciary responsibility to that investee company and not to the PIC. They are not obliged to share information regarding the investee company with the PIC and are not allowed to share certain of the information with the PIC. The post-investment monitoring is done internally. However, where companies are put into workout and recovery, the internal team usually work through an external service provider to assist with the turnaround of a company.
Point 12.
The PIC has been involved in transactions which were put under liquidation and in business rescue. On business rescue type situations, it is still early to say whether it is successful or not. However, there are several instances where the PIC has implemented interventions which has turned around companies in distress. There are presently 20 companies in a varying degree of distress. Of this 20 companies, 3 investments and 8 billion rand, specifically in the poultry industry, logistics and healthcare industry, have been successfully turned around. 13 companies are currently being worked on to restore to profitability, and the remaining 3 companies will in all likelihood end up in liquidation.
Just tell me what happens here. Is there a request that comes to the PIC that a company is in distress or a business is in distress and it needs some financing?
So it depends on company to company, case by case. In some instances, the company will come to PIC, admit that they are in distress, looking for additional funding, or the PIC will pick up through the monitoring unit that this company is not honoring their debt and that they have financial disability, and then the PIC would step in and start working with management of that company.
What consideration is there from the PIC side? What do you consider in order to get to the decision that this company should be assisted?
That the company should be, sorry, sir?
Assisted.
Assisted.
Yeah.
Well, they looked basically at the financial statements and how they are servicing the PIC loans, and then we either put management in the company or we put extra board members in the company to look after the company.
And you say that some or all of these interventions have been successful?
At this stage, there's 3 companies that looks as if they will not be able to turn around, but will go into liquidation.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner. What percentage of unlisted transactions submitted are declined, and what is the success rate?
Typically, PIC does between 10 and 20 transactions per annum between private equity and impact investing. More than 90% of the applications received are declined. If success is defined as the impairment rate, it would be below 10%.
Question? In terms of success, the sort of the definition of success, one would like maybe to get more there, because really it's about returns. You know, what percentage of deals sort of meet original sort of returns which were, you know, modeled and all that. So I think it would help if we can get that kind of information, saying 1/3, say, of the deals have met these returns, which were budgeted for, and say another 2/3 or another third was trading water, and say another percentage is below returns. I think it will probably be a better way to look at those sort of 140 transactions or so in the unlisted space.
Sure, we will bring this information back.
Make sense? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. Point 14, Mr. Dolama's evidence.
From the fund of funds, team has committed capital to 24 funds. 16 of these funds are in South Africa and 7 is in the rest of Africa, and then there's 1 global fund. In the previous response, he says they were stated 24 and not 23. Previously he said there was 23 funds, so he just corrected it to say there's 24 funds. And then racial classification of fund managers is done for South African fund managers in the terms of the BBBEE Act. In the rest of Africa, PIC determine if individuals in the fund manager are born in Africa or not. PIC have confined the response to the South African fund managers, and 10 out of the 16 South African fund managers are black fund managers, constituting 62% of total committed capital in South Africa. Fund managers.
Thank you. Can we deal with the day 2, the evidence of Mr. Fidelis Matabu?
There the Commission requested an extract from the minutes of the meeting held on 20 December 2017, where the AO transaction was presented, and we've included a list there of the members that were present as well as the invitees to the company.
Thank you. Can we look at 16, provide a breakdown of equities?
We've provided this breakdown in terms of the total value of the equity portfolio, the percentage of the value following the benchmark, percentage and value externally managed, and the percentage and value enhanced beta.
Mr. Commissioner, can we take the figures as read? I don't think it's necessary to read it out. Thank you. Then the executive head listed, Mr. Point 15, no, we've done that. 17.
Just a question. Can I ask that, you know, you did this thing for the listed site. Can you please do the same format for the unlisted site?
For the unlisted,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, just across the GPF, UIF,
And the CC,
for the unlisted
sure.
site, yeah. Which
Thank
will
you.
cover all the assets, I guess, now.
Yeah.
Because here it's just the listed
This
ones.
is just the listed.
Yeah, please, yeah. Same table, different, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Can do
Point
that.
17.
Point 17 deals with the externally managed funds. The PIC externally managed fund team allocates capital to managers in accordance with the client mandates, which detail the strategies that may be externalized, including target risk and return objectives. As at 31st December 2018, PIC has externalized assets to 22 domestic asset management firms, managing assets on behalf of the GEPF and the UIF across various asset classes. Furthermore, the PIC has externalized assets to 8 foreign asset management firms who manage non-domestic mandates on behalf of the GEPF and the UIF. The external manager program was launched in 2009 with an initial focus on domestically listed equity managers, capital managed by the appointed domestic asset managers, a total of approximately 167 billion rand as at 31st December 2018, constitutes 8% of PIC's total assets under management and is allocated as per asset class. And we've got the listed equities, 143 billion rand, listed fixed income is 17 billion, listed property 4.2 billion, and Africa equity is 2.2 billion. Of the 22 domestic managers, 14 are predominantly black owned with more than 50% black ownership, while 4 of the managers do not have black ownership levels greater than 51%. The split of assets between these two groups is currently approximately 60% to BEE managers, with 40% allocated to non-BEE managers.
Thank you. Mr. Commissioner, can we take the figures stated on 14 as read?
Yes, we will.
And we deal with page 15 then.
Page 15 deals with the investment process relating to the reallocation and termination of mandates of the externally managed fund managers. The externally managed fund team aims to construct solutions on behalf of clients that consistently deliver returns in excess of the client benchmark over the long term and in line with client expectations. The portfolio construction process employed by the team involves the optimization of client solutions to ensure that the allocation of strategies and managers is optimal in achieving client objectives. The process is highly cognizant of the prevalent strategies in the market, the manager's exposure to those strategies, and the contribution for each manager to the risk and return of the solution. The reallocation of capital to fund managers is a result of the monitoring of these factors with cognizance of the client mandate. The team typically adds new managers to the portfolio based on the strategic requirements of the solution and appoints domestic managers through a request for proposal process, which is designed to create a database of approved managers. The request for proposal process is typically run every 2 to 3 years. The team has a detailed and consistent approach to monitor managers and the causes of action should irregularities occur. The process is a rational and disciplined framework for managing the existing investment manager relationships. The decision-making process is systematic and aims to improve the quality and timelines of its manager retention and termination decisions. The objective of the monitoring program is to identify on a timely basis any adverse changes in the investment manager's organization, investment process, or performance results. Daily and monthly monitoring of positions relative to benchmarks is followed by quarterly contact sessions with managers for engagement on performance, risk management, portfolio construction, and qualitative business updates. The teams also visit the investment managers' primary place of business on an annual basis to validate the details obtained about the team, organization, and the systems they have in place.
Mr. Commissioner, can we take 16 as read? It's just a further explanation of this process. Thank you. Then on point 18, organogram of listed investment team, you've added Annexure 8 to this document. Is that your response?
That's correct.
What other SIP's investments were done except for Steinhoff and Vodacom?
Pareto, Bayport, Texton Properties, Grid, and Growth Point were the other structured investment products.
Thank you. Then Mr. Polwane's evidence, there were questions asked about his department, give an overview of the number of resignations versus the number of suspensions and dismissals at the PIC. There is a table on page 17 and 18. Mr. Commissioner, can we take it as read? It's just a statistical set out of the question. Thank you.
Just a question, if the external managers, do they, the people who manage the external managers, do they have a link with the people who manage the internal portfolio by any chance?
So they are both reporting, the external managers team are reporting to the executive head listed investments, Mr. Fidelis Madavu, and the internally managed team is also reporting to Mr. Madavu. So there is a link between them.
And don't they appear within, say, the PMC listed whenever decisions have got to be taken?
Yes, both of them are there.
So it might well mean that the people who serve on the PMC do know what the external managers are doing and the internal ones.
Sir, I can't answer that question very 100% sure. I have to confirm that with my colleagues, because I know PIC doesn't know exactly what the managers are doing. They are just monitoring performance. So PIC doesn't know the trades that they are doing, but I can come back on that question. That will be the safest.
Thank you. Then, on day 3, Mr. Nemagovani, the internal auditor, testified. We've already dealt with 21. 12 cases were reported via the whistleblowing. The loan to MST is correct. We have dealt with it this morning, and it is clear that the January 2019 installment not paid. And the members present at the AO transaction on the 20th of December, that has already been dealt with, but there's again a column setting out who were present. Is that correct, on page 20?
That's correct, sir.
Then if we can deal with day 4.24, there's a provide PIC's full exposure to state-owned entities. There it is in terms of Annexure B attached. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Then an important matter that was raised by Ms. Marcus, one of the members, is the shareholding in Moana Properties. What is the response?
The PIC on behalf of the GPF held 76% of Pareto Limited. Pareto held 100% of Moana Properties. The shareholders in Pareto are thus the GPF, PIC on behalf of the GPF, 76%, and the other shareholder is Belelani at 24%. And then Pareto that holds 100% of Moana.
Sorry, can I just ask a follow-up question there? As you've got on your list there, the list of directors of Pareto include a non-executive board member. Is that person there at the behest of PIC, or was she there in her own right?
No, at the behest of PIC.
Thank you. Can we deal with the last point, 28? How many jobs were lost as a result of the James Nogu email?
The loss of jobs in relation to the James Nogu email is a disciplinary outcome where the employee was found guilty of accessing confidential information. but there were no other job losses at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. That is the evidence of Mrs. Lowe. She will deal with the other two issues raised by the Commission, and we will again present a report in this form.
Is the employee who was dismissed for being guilty of accessing confidential information, is that Mr. Maisel?
That's correct, sir.
Perhaps just to clear this point, Mr. Commissioner, the Chair also testified that as a direct fallout of this NOCU email, it led to the separation agreement with the executive head IT, as well as the disciplinary hearing of the company secretary.
That's correct, sir.
Sorry, what is the confidential information that Mr. Maisela accessed?
What's the
Because I thought he was disciplined for not reporting
on the criminal charges.
that he had laid a criminal charge.
So I don't have the information on that. I do have the documents which I can make available to the Commission, but I don't have the detail on that.
Thank you. That is the evidence of Mrs. Lowe. Can she be excused, Chair?
You can be excused. You are excused, Ms.
Thank
Lowe.
The
Thank
next
you very
witness
much.
is Mr. Magovani. Is he? Chair, can I just get an indication? Are we sitting till 4 o'clock? Thank you. No. I have placed the final report of the Internal Audit Department before the Commission, Mr. Commissioner. Stand and take the oath.
Your full names again, please.
Lufuno Emmanuel Nemakovane.
Before.
Yes, I've been here before.
Yes, and you took the oath to tell the truth.
Yes.
So you don't have any objection to repeating it.
No.
Whether the evidence you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Mr. Nemagovani, for the record, you have completed your preliminary review that was tabled at the board meeting in December 2018. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct. It was tabled on the, if I may just correct the date, it was tabled on the 21st, if not the 20th of January.
Excuse you, my apology, you're absolutely correct. You were instructed in December to do this investigation.
Yes, I got the instruction in December.
Thank you. Now, the final report you filed, which is now before the Commission, is identical to the preliminary report, except for some cosmetic or grammatical changes. But the findings and everything are exactly the same.
Yes, the findings are exactly the same with the draft report. So in the previous appearance when I was here, we indicated that there will be further work that we need to do, but then the way, you know, we agreed with the Commission's investigation that those elements, they will actually carry them forward.
Now, if I can briefly take you back to the first engagement with the board when you presented your preliminary report in January. I understand that before the board meeting, you had a meeting with the chair.
Yes, I did. I took him through the report because when we were busy with this work, we were requested actually by the CEO in December to conduct this work after she received a letter from the chairman raising his concerns emanating from the meeting that they had, PIC had with Scopa. So then we issued our first draft of the work that we were requested to do to the CEO, and when she realized that she was also mentioned or implicated in the report, she requested to be recused. Therefore, I was requested to deal directly with the chairman.
When you refer to the CEO, I suppose you're referring
The
to
acting
the acting CEO.
Yes, yes, Chair.
Thank you. Then, just briefly, can you tell the Commission what happened at the board meeting? And the reason for this question is that evidence will be let that when you arrived at the board meeting, there was only the one copy available, and there were no copies for the board members. Is that correct?
Yes, so when we arrived at the board meeting, the only copy that was available, it was the copy that was printed by the chairman, because I had submitted this report to him via email. So that was the only copy. Then the board members in that meeting requested that I present copies to them. Then we organized hard copies because we didn't want this report to be circulated via email, given that as it was presented in the previous presentation that I gave, that this was still work in progress, and it was just to update the board. I think we were at the stage where we could update the board in terms of the progress of this work.
Good. Now, again briefly, did you take the board chair and the members through this report that evening?
That evening, yes. Given that the board members, I mean, majority of them, except for the chairman, were seeing the report for the first time. So in that evening, I took, sufficient time. I think I took about 5 hours taking, the board through the report and explaining everything so that every board member will be informed in terms of the content of this report.
Thank you. And the findings in this preliminary report, as confirmed by your final report, is that there was non-compliance of procedures of the PIC, and that the people involved in this, especially those in attendance on the 20th of December 2017, that action should be taken against them.
Yes, so that's what basically the report is saying, that in dealing with this transaction, the PIC processes were not followed. I think it's safe to say from the beginning, think up to the end of the transaction, there were lots of breaches of PIC processes, and all the key people who were involved throughout the process, we recommended that action may be taken against them.
You didn't
Sorry, but when you are talking about this transaction, you mean the IO transaction?
IO transaction.
Just for the record that we're dealing with the IO
My
transaction.
apologies.
Thank
And
you.
the question, when you say all the people, sort of how many people are we talking about here, roughly? All the people who were in that transaction?
We're talking about, the deal team. That will involve Mr. Victor Sayani, it will involve Sunil, it will involve Lebogang, it will involve Fidelis. So that is the team that would have worked on this transaction. It will also involve other people who played other roles in this transaction.
But the question that I think that raises is, if we take the evidence of Mr. Siani, he says that his role was not, or he presented a different view of what should be done, and that was not taken account. So the question is not whether you were involved, but whether were you involved in violating the decision-making processes, or not just whether you were involved in the deal. I mean, there must be a distinction between the two, surely.
Yes, I agree with that. And when I say people who were involved, I mean people who were involved in breaching the PIC processes. And Mr. Victor Siani is one of them.
Just to ask further there, so you are saying within the deal team, you mentioned 4 people, and then the other areas, where would they be, where? In risk or ESG or where? Where would the other people be? Just give me rough ideas about that.
So the other people, yes, the risk people have been involved. They played a role in this transaction. But in our assessment, we didn't find that, they have breached the processes. So their involvement actually, or the work that they have done, it was based on the instruction that was against PIC process that was given by Mr. Victor Sian.
So meaning you are saying, when you say all the people, you are talking about the 4 people in the deal team. There are no other people outside of the deal team?
I can maybe just mention the names of other peoples and also their roles, if I may.
Yeah.
So within the deal team, I've already mentioned the 4 people, and then Mr. Siani, Victor Siani, Mr. Sunil, I also indicated Mr. Lebogang, Molebatsi, yes.
And Fidelis Madavu.
Fidelis Madavu. And then there are also other people who were involved in, or who contributed in breaching the payment processes. And then that is the acting CEO currently, but at the time it was the CFO, Mr. Matsepo Moore, and then Fidelis Madavu, my apology. Then you have got Brian Mavuka, the GM of Finance. You have got Winnie, which was acting executive head of legal. And you also have the former CEO, Dr. Dan Machila.
Winnie, is it number 10, Winnie Sechedi?
Yes, Chair.
And the then CEO.
the current acting CEO,
And the then
but
CEO.
then she was the CFO.
So that's quite a number. That's quite a large number.
It's a large number, and this is due to, how transactions are done within PIC, because you will have the transaction team and also have support divisions, like your divisions that provide assurance as far as the due diligence are concerned, risk, legal, and ESG. But in this case, obviously, we don't have them as people who breached the processes, only the people that I have mentioned. So the main processes were around, the transaction team. That's where most of the processes were breached, or majority of people come from, and maybe more than one offense come from, and also the finance part, where now the authorization or the approval of the payment was coming from. So that process also was breached. But also in the middle, you have, the main issue, which was that the subscription was signed before, the due processes could be complied with.
Yeah, let me just come in. That was already up towards the last stages, where the then CEO is alleged to have signed before there was approval
Yes, so
by
this...
the PMC.
Yes. So this is how, these breaches actually occurred. So after Mr. Victor Siani received the pre-listing statement and the non-disclosure agreements, instead of waiting for the PMC meeting, the first PMC meeting to take place, he issued instructions to the risk team, legal, and also ESG. And how it happened, instead of issuing these instructions to the heads of these divisions, he actually issued them to the people that I think he thought are the ones who are supposed to do the duties. And then they went ahead with the process. And before PMC 1 or PMC 2 could sit, the subscription was signed. And then before PMC 1 or 2 could sit, the payment, the memo which was authorizing that payment, should be done on this transaction was also signed and approved. And PMC set on the following day, which was the 20th of December.
If I remember correctly, it is the PMC that gives authorization for the risk committee to do the risk analysis.
So it is PMC that will approve that the team or the relevant divisions, which is ESG, legal, and also risk, can go and perform the due diligences.
I get you.
What I have difficult to understand is that Victor Siani, if I go through this list, he was the most junior member in that team on the 20th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did he tell you during your investigation that he was instructed to do what he did?
The only thing he told us, it was that he was delegated to work on this deal. But when we asked him who instructed him to instruct the other teams to conduct their due diligence, he said no one instructed him. This he did out of his own discretion, because that's what he understood the process to be.
He testified under oath before this commission. What happened? Did you take that evidence into account before compiling your final report?
We listened, to what he presented to the commission. Obviously, there are things that he said to the commission that he never disclosed to us. Things such as, he was put under pressure to us, he never disclosed those kind of things. But the evidence that he presented here did not change, the facts that we have before us. As much as there are things he presented to the commission that based on the information that we have, we cannot support, based on the hardcore evidence that we have.
The other troubling thing for me is the most senior people at this meeting were the acting CEO, the present acting CEO, and the then CEO. And they were well aware on the 20th of December when this meeting was held that what they did before the meeting was absolutely contrary to the policies and procedures of the PIC. Is that not correct?
So the CEO was well aware, the former CEO was well aware, but maybe I must also disclose before this commission that based on the records from HR, the former CEO was supposed to be on leave on that day. So, but he attended the meeting, and the CFO was the acting chair in that meeting. But when we asked her about the subscription, whether was she aware that the irrevocable subscription was signed before that meeting, she indicated to us that she was not aware. However, in our interview with her, we asked her, then why were you signing the payment memo before the 20th? Before a PMC could sit and approve this. And she gave us the explanation, but she could not really justify, why did she sign the memo.
Thank you. Then we heard the evidence of the chair this morning about the disclosure of the true facts of this transaction, the AO transaction, to the Audit and Risk Committee, to the Investment Committee, to Parliament on 2 occasions, that the true facts were not disclosed by the PIC on these 4 occasions I'm mentioning. Are you in agreement with that?
There is information that in our assessment, we thought it would have been critical to be disclosed at various forums from PMC, which is the committee that was approving this, supposed to approve this transaction. There were key facts that were not disclosed, such as the subscription has already been signed on the 14th before the committee sits. And also at the investment committee, there is information that in our assessment, we have noted or identified that it should have been disclosed, but it was not. For example, on the 20th of December 2017, PMC, one of the conditions of approval was that ESG and legal, they need to complete or to finalize their DDs, meaning that the due diligence reports or reports coming from these 2 divisions were not complete at the time PMC said. And, but this, when management reported to IC, this one condition of the approval, they captured all the other resolution, but this one fact, it was not reported to IC. And also the same applied, when they reported to GPF, when they reported to Parliament, and which we thought it was important because in our assessment, we have identified or we have obtained evidence which shows that the ESG and legal due diligence reports condition up to date has never been satisfied.
It is not only important, it's critical, isn't it?
It is critical, yes.
I'd just like to take you back to this question of Victor Siani. And obviously I'm remembering his evidence, I don't have it directly in front of me, but I recall him saying that he valued the share price at a very different value to what was paid. And there were a whole lot of areas in which he indicated the recommendations that he had made that were changed. Why would you have not given him the opportunity to engage with you as you finalize your report? Not simply about whether he violated the procedures by commissioning the risk people and the people to start doing the work. He indicated that was because of the pressure of time to have the deal completed, and therefore he began work. But I would have thought you would want to check on some of the other things as to what his evidence said in contradiction to what occurred, or in contrast to what occurred. I'm just a little surprised that you didn't think it was necessary, given the amount of differentiation.
Commissioner, through you. At the time, I think this report, the way it was compiled, you will see that there are elements of that we did not cover in it. And as I indicated, this will be covered by the commission, forensic team. For example, there are areas where when we prepared this report, we indicated that these elements will require forensic, expertise. And at the time, Mr. Victor Siani, this is information he disclosed to the commission, and he did not disclose to us. And we thought that, all the other information together with anything that contradicts this report, all that will be carried, or be performed by the forensic team so that those loose ends can be disclosed. Because Mr. Victor Siani, at the time we completed our work, he was on suspension, But the main reason here is that we had an understanding with the the commission's forensic team that the elements that we cannot close, they will be covered there.
My last question, I'm sorry.
Can I just, I'm looking at Mr. Siani's statement, which is actually his evidence before the commission. He says at paragraph 67, the ESG risk and legal emailed their completed due diligence reports to me on 14 December 2017 at 17 hours 21 and 15 December 2017 at 08:21, that's legal, and then risk at 11. Your evidence just now was that up to this day, I think you mentioned 2 of them have still not been completed.
So, Chair, if I may, the risk report was submitted on the 15th at 11 based on the information that we have. I'm on page 11 of the report. The legal report was submitted on the 15th at 8:25. The ESG report was submitted on the 14th. So there were reports that were submitted to the committee. And I think also on the report we highlighted in our discussions with the legal department and also the ESG department, they indicated that these are not due diligence reports. This is a desk analysis of the work that they have done, because there was still other work that they needed to do. And I think that's what they presented to the committee. And the committee approved subject to them going to finalize their work.
That's correct.
I'm assuming, Advocate Libber, I'm assuming that there will be further evidence with regard to this, because there's now contradictory statements or evidence, as it were, which I interpret to mean what Mr. Siana is saying here is not the full version, as it were, because these were not full risk reports, but rather desk. What is that term that you use?
They call it desktop analysis reports.
So I'm assuming that there will be other evidence that will be placed before us, or in the end we will have to get to a conclusion or decision as to which version is the correct version.
So based on, if I may, based on our understanding and the evidence that we gathered and we discussed with the people who were responsible for preparing these reports, that's what they said. This is a desktop analysis, because there was still work that was outstanding, and we asked them if that work is completed today, and they indicated that it is not completed yet.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. The last question I want to ask. This audit query about the AO transaction was raised in February 2018. Is that correct?
It was raised from our side. I mean, we picked up the issue we reported it, I think, in May. Yes, we reported in May to the Audit and Risk Committee.
But it was already picked up in February?
In April.
In April.
Yes.
Now, it's a serious audit query as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
And in the governance framework of companies, especially a place like the PIC, this was reported to the Audit and Risk Committee.
Yes, we tabled it in the in-camera meeting of the Audit and Risk Committee. But as I highlighted previously, I discussed this as part of my, normal preparation with the chairman of the audit before the meeting, where I tabled this because I considered it to be a serious issue. So I did not submit it through the normal channels where it will be made available to everyone, because whatever we submit through the normal channels is made available to everyone, including management and so forth. So then we decided that this one, I will discuss it with the chairman of the audit committee, and then we'll take it into the in-camera meeting, and then which we did. And then in that meeting, the committee resolved that this matter must be referred to the investment committee.
But my concern is, it is so serious that it is not reported through the normal channels. It is reported in camera. But why was it never elevated to the board level? Because of the seriousness of this whole transaction and the non-compliance with procedures.
So, how committees report, to board, like for example, the Audit and Risk Committee will do its work, and then after that it will prepare a report that comes now from the Audit and Risk Committee to report, you know, on all the issues and the resolutions that they have made in that particular meeting. And the same applies with the investment committee. They will also prepare a summary of, you know, all the issues, including the decisions and issues that needs to be referred to the committee, and they will go as part of its report. So I think that's what I can say about.
If the Audit and Risk Committee reports to the board, are you present?
I am present, I mean, in the normal session of that meeting, yes.
And you've never been present in 2018 at a board meeting where this matter was raised?
I don't remember, I mean, this issue being covered in the report of the Audit and Risk Committee that was presented to the board. I stand to be corrected from the IC side on how did they report on this.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. That concludes the evidence, unless there's further questions by the Commission.
Can you just remind me who the chair of the Audit Committee was at the time, Audit and Risk Committee?
It was Ms. Tanda Swafubu.
Mr. Commissioner, that is the evidence. I have a further witness that I don't think will take more than, sorry.
The one question is just to understand with this report, where do we go from here? Is that going to be completed by the commission and they will say whatever they say in terms of who breached what and, you know, and all the issues? Is that correct?
The Commission will have to deal with this report, and as the witness correctly pointed out, the forensic team of the Commission is also dealing with this, and hopefully we'll have a final report on this report later during the proceedings.
Which will be presented here?
Yes.
Okay, for us. Okay, thanks.
Can the witness then be excused?
Yes, you are excused, Mr.
Mr. Botha,
Namakovai.
can you?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll take 10 minutes. My next witness is Mr. Dion Botha, Commissioner. He is the Head Corporate Affairs of the PIC. You have a statement in front of you, which he will deal with in his evidence, and I trust that I will be in a position to finish before 4 o'clock. Can you just take the oath?
Your full names, please.
Botha?
Jan Botha. Mr. Botha, have you got any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No, Commissioner.
Do you swear that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Commissioner. Mr. Botha, you have prepared a statement. It's not necessary to read everything into the record. Can you just, for the record, deal with paragraph 2 of your statement?
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Advocate Libbe. I'm employed by the Public Investment Corporation as the Head of Corporate Affairs. I've been with the Public Investment Corporation since 2004, having been seconded there by the National Treasury. I was then appointed as Senior Manager of Special Projects. With one of my key projects as the corporatization of the PIC, I assisted with the legislation in that regard. Following the corporatization of the PIC, I was appointed as Senior Corporate Governance Specialist to establish the environmental, social and governance monitoring function at the PIC that monitors corporate governance compliance in companies where the PIC is invested in. Since November 2015, I am the Head of Corporate Affairs, responsible for stakeholder and client relations and communication, both internally and externally, including the media.
Now, deal with paragraph 3, please.
I've been requested by the evidence leader of the Commission of Inquiry into allegations of impropriety regarding the Public Investment Corporation, Advocate Libbe SC, to submit a statement on the process followed when responding to media queries at the PIC in general, as well as specifically in the case of the investment in IO Technologies. This is due to the fact that some of the media statements of the PIC on the IO matter are contrary to the evidence that was placed before this Commission.
All right, you have set out in detail in your statement the processes. Can we summarize it by assisting the Commission to say you receive a media query? Briefly, what do you do then?
When we receive a media query, we normally prefer that it be in writing. We then have a look at the query as a team in corporate affairs. We then send it to the relevant team within the PIC who deals with that specific query, and they then draft a response to us, or what we sometimes do is we meet with that team and then we draft a response, but even our response is then sent back to the team so that they can ensure that they are happy with the contents, the factual contents of that response. We then look at it from a media perspective to make sure it is correct for public dissemination, and we cover all those aspects, language aspects, etc., and then it's submitted to the Chief Executive Officer for his approval, his or her approval before it is sent out to the media.
So to summarize, although the statement goes out under your name, it follows a process where you rely on the factual correctness of the information supplied by the team, and it is then finally checked by the CEO of this institution who signs it off, and then the statement will be issued through your office.
That's correct.
Now, can we turn to paragraph, you will notice in your statement there are two paragraphs, 11, but it's the 11 dealing with media responses with regard to AO Technologies. Can you deal with that, please?
I can deal with that. With regards to the media responses dealing with the PIC investment in IO Technology, the process outlined earlier has been followed. Media responses were drafted by or in consultation with the Listed Investment Division and approved by the Executive Head for Listed Investments as well as the Chief Executive Officer. In retrospect, following testimony at this commission by the Head of Internal Audit, Mr. Mfuno Nemagovani, as well as the Assistant Portfolio Manager in Listed Equities, Mr. Victor Sihani, it seems as if media statements issued by the PIC and attributed to me might have contained incorrect information. These media statements indicated that the correct investment processes has been followed when the IO Technologies transaction was approved. I can also state that following this morning's session with the chairman of the PIC board, he also testified to this effect that the processes weren't followed correctly. In line with the processes outlined in paragraphs 6, 7, and 8 above, all media responses regarding IO Technologies followed the correct approval processes, and I can deal with these media responses below, where I quoted some examples, 13.1 to 13.4, and I've also attached Annexures A to Annexures D, 4 examples that was followed. I don't know, Commissioner, if you want me to read it out specifically, or...
Well, Advocate Libbe, I just wondered, if we are going to use a statement and we jump certain paragraphs and they are not read into the record,
no,
and somebody in future takes this commission on review and the record is incomplete, what will the position be? I don't know.
No.
It just struck my mind that...
No, with respect, Mr. Commissioner, I take that point. That's why I hand in the written statement. It's confirmed to be correct. It's not necessary to deal with and to read out all the figures and explanations because it's been confirmed as being correct. But in this instance, I would prefer the witness to deal with these press statements as set out in his statement.
Sure, I'll do that. On Saturday, the 17th of March 2018, we received a response from City Press. The response to City Press was, we will deal with the specific questions you are raising as soon as possible. However, for now it is enough to point out that all the investments that the Public Investment Corporation, PIC, undertake follow a thorough investment process. IO technology is not any different. This response was drafted in consultation with and approved by the Chief Executive Officer of the PIC, and that's attachment Annexure A. On Wednesday, 21 March 2018, in response to a Business Day and City Press query, we have received your query and respond as follows. At the outset, it is necessary to state that the investment was done in line with the client mandate, followed the required investment processes, and was approved within the PIC's delegation of authority framework. Below, we provide answers to the specific questions you are raising. Question: Did IO provide historic financial statement to BT as the PIC requested? BT is British Telecommunications. Apologies, Commissioner. As the PIC requested on 3 occasions between 16 November and 14th of December. The Portfolio Management Committee flagged that they had not provided those on 14 December, which was mere days before the placement. The response by the PIC: figures that were presented by IO in its pre-listing statement, which was subject to scrutiny by the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, JSE, were enough to enable the PIC to prepare assumptions and make a decision to invest in the company. Question: on the 15th December, the PIC Credit Risk Committee still said that the 2017 financials were outstanding. Is this true? And if so, how can the PIC invest 4.3 billion in an entity with such elementary requests not being timeously met? Response: the financial statements of 2017, 2016 and 2015 were included in the pre-listing statement with an assurance report provided by a reputable professional services and advisory company, Grant Thornton Cape Incorporated. Next question: why was the due diligence requirement waived for IO investment on 15 December, days before the listing of the company? Response: the PIC followed the due diligence process that is applicable to listed investments in terms of its delegation of authority, as well as all relevant policies. No due diligence requirements were waived. In fact, as far back as November 2017, we already had concluded due diligence reports that covered risk, legal, and environmental, social, and governance aspects.
Was that correct?
It seems that it was not correct, sir.
If I can put it otherwise, it is not factually correct, it's in fact a lie.
You can put it that way, I guess. The next question, I'm following up on the City Press article about the PIC's investment in IO and concerns that the proceeds would be used by Secunjalo to repay the independent loan, and also that due processes weren't followed in making the investment. Response: the proceeds of the IPO will not be used for any other purpose except for acquisitions as stated in the pre-listing statement. The allegations that part of the money will be used to repay the loan that the PIC advanced to Secunjalo Consortium when it acquired Independent News and Media South Africa are false. The Public Investment Corporation, PIC, is in line with its clients' mandates committed to make investments that drive social and economic transformation. Supporting black companies that list on the stock exchange is just one of the many ways by which we support transformation of several sectors of our economy. The investment in IO Technology Property Limited is in line with this objective. Recently, we have supported other similar transactions such as RH Bupelo Hospital Services, Africa Energy Partners, Clean Energy Provider, Sea Harvest Fishing, and African Rainbow Capital Financial Services. All of these responses were drafted by the listed investment team responsible for the transaction and approved by both the executive head for listed investments as well as the Chief Executive Officer. And I
Mr. Burt-
attach that as Annexure B.
I'm sorry, I must, sorry to interrupt you.
No problem.
As we analyze these questions put to the PIC, it's apparent to me that these are all leaked information to the press.
That's correct. Wednesday, the 18th April 2018, there was another query, this time from Amma Bungani. And the response was, we have received a list of questions regarding our investment in IO Technology Solutions, and to some extent those relating to Sagarmatha. It is common knowledge that the PIC has not invested in Sagarmatha, and this decision was communicated last week. IO Technology Solutions is a listed entity, and the PIC wishes not to make comments or put into the public domain information that may affect the stock. It is, however, sufficient to point out that the investment in IO Technology Solutions, as with all the investments, followed the necessary internal investment approval processes. It is clear from the list of your questions that you are insinuating wrongdoing on the side of the PIC, and that the PIC Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Daniel Machila, is behind these transactions. This is unfortunate. The PIC processes are such that no one individual takes investment decisions. All investments are taken by specific investment committees in line with the approved delegation of authority, and due diligence is a key component of the investment process. Investment in IO is no different. We also note that you keep on referring to PIC documents in your possession, which according to our knowledge were never officially given to you. The only conclusion we can draw from this is that the documents were obtained fraudulently and are part of a concerted effort to undermine and cast aspersions on the PIC. This response was drafted in consultation with the listed investment team responsible for the transaction and also approved by the Chief Executive Officer, as is evident from Annexure C. On Monday, the 23rd of April 2018, in response to a query from Bloomberg, we responded, Public Investment Corporation PIC's investment decisions are based on client mandates. Every investment made has to pass the mandate fit test. IO was no different. The question you are raising encroaches on aspects of the PIC's investment strategy and tactics. However, at a high level, we can say that the outcome of our due diligence indicated that IO Technology Solutions was an attractive catalytic investment with good prospects, and that it could assist in stimulating significant transformation in the information and communications technology ICT sector. The share price performance is not different from most special acquisition companies and investment holding companies in the asset acquisition phase, the so-called J-curve. Regarding Chevron, note that the PIC has been approached to consider a proposed transaction involving acquisition of Chevron South African assets. Decision will be made once all the necessary internal processes have been completed. That was a different transaction referred to in the same inquiry, in the same media query. This response was also approved by both the Executive Head for Listed Investments as well as the Chief Executive Officer. And that is attached as Annexure D to my statement, Commissioner.
Mr. Commissioner, that's the evidence. That is the day. I promised to be finished at 4. I think I made it with a minute to spare.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Botha.
Thank you, sir.
I suppose you want him to be excused.
Yes, please.
You'll excuse Mr. Botha.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll adjourn until 10 tomorrow. Adjourn until 10 tomorrow. We'll adjourn until 10 tomorrow morning.